Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. Good morning, good evening, namaste, hola, bonjour, and maharapan. This is Namya Joshi, your host for the day. Welcome to episode 43 of the podcast Each One, Teach 10, An Amazing World of STEM, an inspiring venture where we will be discussing that STEM is part of every day for every kid. We all will learn together how to build a STEM culture. Well, for today, I'm very excited. Being honest, very excited because I have my guest as Ms Rachelle Dené Poth. So, how are you doing today, Ms Rachelle?
I am doing fantastic. It's a great day. It's a weekend, and I get to spend this time talking with you. So I'm totally honored to be here as your guest today.
Thank you so much, Ms Rachelle. And I'm going to give you all a quick introduction about her. So, she is an EdTech consultant, presenter, attorney, author, and teacher. She teaches Spanish and STEAM. What's next in emerging technology at Riverview Junior-Senior High School in Oakmont, PA. She's an ISTE Certified Educator, a past president of the ISTE Teacher Education Network, and served on the leadership team of the Mobile Learning Network for 5 years, and a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. That's so inspiring. So we would love to know more about you, ma'am.
More, you just said so much about me that I forget about some things. I guess to sum it up, I will say that I love learning. I've always, even when I was a kid, loved playing school, loved going to school most of the time, I guess you could say. And I love technology and always had a love of languages. And that's how I got started with French, actually, is what I was certified to teach in. But my grandfather was always speaking French to me. And we had a student come from France when I was, I think, in the ninth grade. And from that point on, I just love languages, love technology, and just kept continuing to learn and build my skills, and decided somewhere along the way that going to law school was something that I was interested in, even though I didn't do it to get out of teaching. But I've always said, and I've often said even more recently, people tend to think that I was an attorney first, but I was teaching first. And then I went to law school and I graduated a while ago. I think it's been about 16 years now, but honestly, had it not been for law school, I know that I would not still be in education, because that just totally changed who I was as a person, how I saw my role in the classroom as a teacher, as a student, and just kind of reinvigorated me. So when people ask me, when did I start teaching? I have like two answers. I usually go with like the more recent one, just because that's when I really felt like I dove into, teaching and trying all of these different things, of course, STEM being one of them. So I think I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, we could be here for a while.
And you talked about French, so I would like to sum up my belief towards you in line of French. That's c'est tellement inspirant.
Say that again, tell more.
C'est tellement inspirant. Did we say that's so inspiring? Like, c'est tellement inspirant.
Yes, inspirant. Tell more. I don't know. It's French was something, any languages. I've been teaching them for a really long time, but when I graduated from college, my certification wasn't teaching French. And I didn't always know that I wanted to be a teacher. It was just, I was good at the language. And so I kind of went into that direction, but couldn't get a job just teaching French. And that's when I got back into school and took the Spanish degree coursework. And probably for the last maybe 10 years now, I think I've just been teaching Spanish because my school is smaller. And we have one French teacher and just me as a Spanish teacher, but I also teach this theme course. But I'm very realistic, and I know that not all students will go on to be Spanish majors or language majors and don't totally see the value in learning a language on a daily basis. But I say, one, I didn't know when I was your age that I would be a teacher, let alone teaching Spanish and not French. But there are so many benefits of having the language skills. But as a teacher, I also realize I need to help students to build skills in other areas, that whatever they decide to do when they leave my classroom in our schools. And so that's where the technology and all these other opportunities come in. But I get very excited to teach about verbs and grammar and sentence structures and things like that. I don't know that my students get to be that excited about it. Some do, because then they can process like our own language and understand some words in English that they didn't necessarily understand prior to the Spanish. So it does have its benefits, but it's not the easiest thing to learn, but it definitely has a lot of positive benefits to it, I should say.
Right, I agree with that. I guess learning languages helps us get connected to people all across the world. So, like in India, it's like people almost know three languages because it comes Hindi, English, and every state has its own language. So we
Okay.
can communicate with each other in a way like if it's Alam in Punjab, so that's Punjabi. And
Right.
similarly, each state has its own language. So I guess if we learn more and more languages, that helps us to get more connected.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm always amazed that, you know, learning, people will say, well, you speak so many languages. And I say, well, I speak three. I can read some Italian. I'm not very good at speaking Italian. I try to mix them between the French and the Spanish. A little bit of Portuguese I can understand, but I've met people who speak 7, 8 or more languages. And I'm just amazed that they can just shift between all of them so quickly. But that's because in most of those cases, they've started learning them at such a young age. And that's not quite the same here in the United States. So I don't know.
Right, that's great. So, moving on to my first question to you, Ms. Rachelle, I want to know that student engagement remains important to learning, and teachers keep finding new ways every day to motivate and engage their students. So, could you tell us some tips for the educators present here watching us live to boost the student engagement using tech in pedagogy?
Yeah, so that's a great question for me because for a really long time, I totally misunderstood student engagement. I thought that, and I've been wrong about a lot of things over my teaching career. So I've continued to learn and explore and change every single year, every single day sometimes. But I would look at students in my classroom who were playing a game or doing an activity, and they had this look where they were excited about the game or they were just really involved in it. And I thought that that was student engagement. Then I would have conversations in Spanish or do some type of an assessment, or they had a project or something. And I would see that they weren't really processing and retaining and able to apply like the language like I thought that they should have, because I thought they're so engaged in learning. And it wasn't until I did some work getting my master's degree where I learned about like the true meaning of student engagement and what that means in the classroom and how to kind of create opportunities for students to become more engaged in learning. And it's the same for us as adults. I mean, we want in our learning experiences as educators, we want to have choice in what we're doing. We want to be able to kind of explore things that are of interest to us, to be able to identify our own needs. And when it comes to student engagement, it looks different on everybody. I could look around my classroom, and I've shown pictures of this in presentations I've done where there's a class of students and some of them are just look like they're really interested and some are leaning on their hands. And I often pose the question, do you think these students are engaged in learning? And I get mixed responses to it, but because it looks differently. And for students, when they feel like what they're doing is meaningful and they have a voice and choice in what they're learning, and it's not specifically like, okay, we're all doing the same thing, we have this amount of time, that definitely makes a difference for students. And for me in my classroom, like I was giving them choices in projects to create and games and activities to do, but I was still limiting those choices and giving students, for example, when I shifted to using project-based learning, where it's uncomfortable for students because they're so used to being told, what to do, how to create it, how much time they have, and then shifting to something like project-based learning, that for some was a little bit like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? But whenever they can have that choice and they're interested in something, and maybe they want to know about, education systems in the world, and they can go and explore on their own, and it's authentic to them, it's meaningful, they're driving their own learning, that makes a big difference. Sometimes even, and I could go, I'll stop after this one, but sometimes even, and I shouldn't say sometimes, a lot of the time and every day I try to do this is asking my students, what do you think about this? Or here's a new tool that we're going to try, or here's some different activity or method that I have. And I want to know what their feedback is, because then that helps me to design other experiences further on. And just like, students need our feedback for them to grow, we need their feedback for us to grow and to make changes too. And I think anytime that we can spark some curiosity, we can promote some creativity for students, when they have those choices and it's meaningful and authentic to them, it's going to increase their motivation for learning, and all of that will connect together and build that student engagement that we want to see for students in learning.
That's so amazing. Listening from you about how important it is to have conversations, the way you mentioned assessments, and that made you realize that we need to have voice, choice, and agency, like Ms. Monica Joshi just mentioned in the chat, that allowing students to demonstrate their understanding in a variety of ways using a variety of tools. By doing these three things is very important. And, like you mentioned, that we need to know how to explore more, because everybody, like every educator, takes the engagement of students ahead in a different and unique way, and that is what brings meaning in the classroom.
Right.
And I love the point when you mentioned feedback, then it comes along the way when you are taking it from the students, or it's vice versa. And I actually agree with all of your ideas, and I also believe that we also in our school, we try to like avoid too long lectures. My teachers are like, they're very creative. They try to do like, they had hands-on activities, and sometimes they take us like outside in the basketball court, or it's like the garden or the school ground. If it's like environment related or physics related, or any activity like in the lab. So if it's not just like a too long lecture and activities are added, so that makes the classroom very engaging.
Yeah, I've done some things like that with my students too, which again, for some teachers, it's uncomfortable to think about taking your students out of the classroom, or if they want to sit on the floor, go into the hall, or taking them outside, because there was always this traditional view of like the classroom with the teacher in the front and the students all sitting and just listening. But what I've learned from breaking away from that is that the students really enjoy opportunities to interact with one another. And it's great for building the skills that they need, not just in the future, but now too. So getting outside, we did that a lot more this year, and they were so responsive and so excited to do even like a word search, but just being outside and interacting and working with each other just made a huge difference.
Right, I agree. Like about verses, like treasure hunts. I guess that's what makes it even more interesting when it comes to SST or history.
Right.
This makes the classroom so engaging.
Yes, I agree.
Right. So moving on to the next question, I would like to ask you that the development of essential social and emotional learning skills, as well as the enhancement of student learning potential, depends upon inclusivity and accessibility. So, what, according to you, can the teachers use as strategies to accommodate each student's need while continuing personalized education and instruction?
Yeah, so I love your questions because they're touching on things of which I thought I understood or thought that I was doing, and using different strategies in my classroom. And when it comes to social emotional learning, and I've told this story so often, is a couple of years ago, somebody said to me, "Hey, what are you doing for SEL in your classroom?" And I froze, because there are so many acronyms in education. I mean, just in general. And instead of responding like, "I don't know," I said, "Well, what are you doing?" And just turned the question just to get some ideas. And they gave me a couple of examples. And so then I processed it quickly. And then I looked it up and found resources. And that was probably 4 years ago. And since then, I was doing some things in my classroom. I didn't necessarily, and I wasn't doing them because I'm like, oh, this is for social emotional learning, so I'm going to put this into my classroom because this is going to align with SEL and the competencies. I was just using some different methods and activities and tools, and the benefits of those were helping students to build those skills, but I wasn't doing it enough. And I didn't understand the relation between providing those opportunities in the classroom and how those directly relate to, well into the 21st century here, but 21st century future ready skills, workplace, career, job outlook of World Economic Forum, and how all of that ties together. So, there are a lot of, and I should say too, in conferences that I've been to, a lot of educators in general will say, it's another thing that I have to add on, because there's a lot. Teaching is tough. It doesn't get easier the longer that you teach. I will tell you that flat out, because I've been in education a long time, especially the last couple of years. But with SEL, there are easy ways to do different activities, or maybe it's a digital tool that you're using to bring it into your classroom without it being something extra added on that doesn't take a lot of extra time. And there are so many benefits to it. And so just as a couple of examples, with looking in our classroom for students, obviously you want to provide them with like personalized learning opportunities. And for students to be able to build their skills, they have to be aware of where they are in terms of learning. Just like we as the teachers have to be able to understand each of our students and where they are on that learning journey. So helping them to develop skills and self-awareness can come from something simple like pre-technology, using a journal and having students write a response to a prompt in a class and express themselves and express their thoughts. Or for me in language, years ago, we had little notebooks and I would have a prompt, and a few days a week, students would write open-ended without that pressure of being right or wrong, just on their own, narrating something in Spanish, hopefully most of the time. Sometimes there was English in that. But then for me to be able to give them feedback in that space and for them to see their growth over time. Now, of course, there's a lot of digital tools out there that you can do that same thing, whether it's blogging or a journal or something to that effect. Also things like, self-management and helping students. I mentioned project-based learning before, but there are methods that teachers might be using like choice boards or a hyperdoc or even project-based learning where students have to design like their own learning journey and the steps in that process. Or maybe they're doing challenge-based learning. And that's stressful because not knowing how to set goals or how to kind of break things down into like small components in one large project and helping students to build their skills in that area. And sometimes, and I've had students say, I really hate this because I don't know how much I'm supposed to finish today, or I don't know what I'm supposed to create. But that's when we can work with students one-on-one and have those conversations and help them to start to set the goals. And then gradually we pull away because they're starting to build their own skills to set those goals and to face challenges and to kind of move forward. Even just, I'll say one more too, when it comes to building relationships and getting to know our classmates and, anybody who's a student, whether you're a younger student or an adult learner, you've been in situations where you are taking a course and you have to work in a team or with a partner, and you always want to pick somebody that but that's not what life is like. We get into different, work experiences or in professional development as teachers, we're sitting with our friends and our colleagues, and then you got to mix it up. And the component of relationship skills, like being able to build relationships, to be able to ask for help, to get to know, who the people are in your classroom. There's a lot of other ways to do that too. And there's some tools out there that you can use to, especially in virtual learning, to have students talk about who they are, share like, this is who I am, these are my likes, these are my interests, or even to have, for me as a language teacher, speaking assessments and building relationships, because as my students are talking about things, I'm getting to know them or they're getting to know each other, and I can still give them that feedback. They still build that self-awareness and all of the other competencies in SEL. I mean, it's slight little things that might be a quick check-in with students. It might be something that just, here's a quick piece of paper, jot down something in response, but it doesn't have to be some big thing that's very time consuming. And I'm going to stop there because I know that was a really long answer. I get the things that I've been learning and changing, I get really excited to talk about just because I know I was one of those people that said, I'm just a Spanish teacher, or it's just one more thing that I have to do. But in most cases, it's things that we are already doing. We're just not necessarily realizing like, I'm doing this because it's SEL, or I'm doing this because it's focused on whatever this topic is.
Your words honestly are very encouraging, Ms. Rachelle. And I totally agree when you talk about how curriculum, when added with social emotional learning, can take us to have future leaders because they'll have the 21st century skills. And it is very important that they are aware about the things. And the example that you gave about writing their thoughts, no matter they were right or wrong, but they could at least know how to write their thoughts and
Right.
know how to express their feelings. And self-management, knowing how to set the goals, and especially the point of team building, because I've seen that with my own friends as well, that they usually want to be in the same team with their friends, but it is important that we learn how to come out of our comfort zone and be able to make good bonds with people at all types, because out of the school we actually have to live the world where we'll have different kind of people, and we have to know how to make bonds with them and how to communicate with them. And besides that, like, I also believe when it comes to, using ed tech to create personalized learning environment, we can have students getting opportunities to be part in the learning experience, and that can also give opportunity to students to share their own knowledge by building, like personalized learning playlists, or making the classroom flexible, like flipped classroom.
Right.
I believe like that's a great idea when it comes to make students more engaging and make them more relaxed, and learn how they can also, like we have this thing called flipped teaching also. So here, students come at the teacher's place and they teach. So this way they
I love
learn
that.
how they can, learn the concept better, and then go to the teacher one by one, and then ask her like, what can I do for this topic? How should I present it? And that will also help a lot to make the concept clearer.
Yeah, I love that. I did that in my Spanish classes. Well, it's been quite a few years because those students, I think, just graduated college. But at the start of the school year, from Spanish 1 to Spanish 2 or 2 to 3, they would often forget a lot of the content. And so I would be the one always doing the review at the start of the year. But instead, I had them come in, and they were in pairs, and they had to take turns being like, I'm the teacher, you're the student, and then kind of rotate. But they came up with like the greatest ideas and ways to practice. And I learned so much from them, but it also helped them to build so many, they became comfortable, they built their confidence, and it developed them as leaders in the classroom that then transfer beyond it. So I love that flipped teaching.
That's great. That's really great to hear from you. So I want to know, like, you've been a STEAM teacher for almost 4 years from now, and you've done a lot in your classroom. That's so amazing. So could you share some of your classroom experiences on STEM and coding?
Yeah. So people often ask me, like, what is the Spanish teacher doing teaching about things like augmented virtual reality and artificial intelligence? And it started because in my school, we had a library, we got a grant to make it into like a makerspace. So STEAM with the A in arts, and I was teaching French and Spanish at the time. I was asked to teach hummingbirds, which kind of threw me at first because I was imagining like the hummingbirds outside in the summer, not an actual robot that is from a company here in Pittsburgh. So we did that for, I think, 2 years. I was not very good at it, and which was uncomfortable for me because I thought I have to be the expert and know all the answers, which I didn't. But the students were great. I mean, they figure it out. You figure things out so quickly. As soon as I'm saying, we're going to do this today, you've created the project and like done. So I did that for 2 years, and then they moved that to a lower grade. So then I had to come up with my own kind of course. And I wanted to teach all the things: coding, AR, VR, artificial intelligence, digital citizenship, because that is really important. Have the device, but don't necessarily know how to use it, and the long lasting imprint that we make when we post things. So I called it What's Next in Emerging Tech. And so we cover a lot of things. Students, it's not meant to be like a stressful course, even though some of the things like coding can be stressful. But we do some things like artificial intelligence and go through and create chatbots. We use some different coding programs, some of which are for younger students, and these are for 8th graders. So they're like 13, 14. But I like to get the feedback from them because with coding, it's something, all STEM needs to be started at an earlier age, and giving students the chance. And I have, is it okay if I show this one? This
For
little,
sure.
okay.
Oh, so cute.
I know this is from Matata Lab. It's called the Tailbot Pro. It is for 3-year-olds and up, which is absolutely amazing. But my 8th, 9th, and 10th graders saw it in my classroom and loved it. But it's, it has the buttons, and you just basically program it and it moves, and you can create your own things. And so in my class, sometimes I'll get some of those tools for coding, whether it's, like this, a hands-on tangible, if it's an online, and I just let them work through it because I want to know, for younger students and for teachers who are looking for ideas for those K through 3 or K through 6 ages, that I can recommend something. So we'll go through and we'll test out some things that might be for younger students than what they are. Also, we do a lot of augmented virtual reality, and they create amazing things, sometimes scary things that have clowns popping out in augmented reality or in virtual reality, which is a little bit scarier because you feel like they're right next to you. And then there are some online programs we use for coding. But on the whole, we talk about STEM and the need for skills related to STEM and all the different topics, because some of my students tend to think, and maybe educators think, like that they can't do anything with STEM in their class because they're just a Spanish teacher. But there are lots of ways to bring STEM in, and it can be a simple challenge, like starting at the beginning of the year and having your students get materials and write their name using materials that they find. And it has to be the same, what their height is. That's how big their name has to be. Or there's all of these challenges that you can find that you don't need to provide the materials. But then, of course, there's no shortage of tools out there, whether they're like tangible things like the robots or online tools. But for students, STEM, it does help them to build a lot of essential skills. And it does tie back into the SEL as well, because if they're working together or they're dealing with challenges, or they're just finding that they're interested in, that's something they want to pursue. But I love it because I want to say what decade, but I love technology and still do, and just know that there's such a need. I think like 58 million jobs related to STEM fields are in need by 2025. And where are students going to get those experiences but in our classrooms? And so we all have to kind of find ways to bring it in, even if it's something small, but there are definitely ways to do it.
I agree. That's really influencing. And the way you talked about like hummingbirds and learning from students, I actually believe that even my teachers did the same thing. It's a great feeling because learning from them, we know how we can improve ourselves. And as we learn from the teachers, vice versa happens there as well. And when you mentioned about digital citizenship, I agree to put the point, because it's not just about like being safe online or how you have to use the tools, but also about how you have to act online and how you have to be like a digital citizen and be an impactor to so many people. And the lovely cute robot that you had shown, it was like such a lovely object. And Miss Monica has a question in the chat that if you could let her know the name.
Oh yeah, and I'll type it and I'll drop. I had actually written a blog about it, so I put that into the chat, but it's the Tailbot Pro, and it doesn't always look like a rabbit because it comes with, I think, 3 that you can dress it up, and there's all these interactive mats, has voice commands, so it's a lot of fun. It has all of these things in a box, and we tried it out at the end of the year, and even students in my Spanish class wanted to try it out, which was kind of funny, but it has different languages too, so it's definitely relevant.
That's great. That's inclusivity, because it has so
Yes.
many languages, and in the end, like you mentioned about all skills being connected, like social emotional learning skills, STEM, uh, 4Cs. I guess the future is STEM, like you mentioned. So
Right.
if we use such things like you're using in the classroom, I believe the students will have a great future learning all these skills.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you. So, have you personally had any experience where tech made the difference for you?
Oh my, yes, tons of experiences with it. I would say personally and professionally, just having the technology to connect with other educators, because especially in the last couple of years where we couldn't be in person, being able to connect with other teachers from around the world and learn about their experiences, learn new ideas to bring to my classroom, that was huge. But in terms of my students, with project-based learning, which was something else that I really misunderstood years ago, we used Edmodo. I reached out to some different language educators and I said, hey, I'm trying to connect my students with students in places where Spanish is spoken. We're doing project-based learning. So because of the age group and the time of the year, I found a school in Argentina and Spain. And my students just started to kind of build relationships, ask questions using that space. And then we went to Flipgrid, now Flip, and did videos. And my students had already kind of built those relationships with them, with the other students. And then we're able to see them and ask questions like, why are they holding a thermos? Like, well, that's mate. And in Argentina, they drink mate. Or why do they all have the same thing? Well, they wear uniforms. And being able to ask direct questions and learn in a way that was different from what I could provide for them. Like I could show them videos. I could say, this is what it's like in Argentina, or here's something to read. But for them to have those digital spaces where, one, again, practicing digital citizenship, social emotional learning is tied in because responsible decision making, they're building relationships, they're developing social awareness, and self-management, of course, because it's stressful, and work on PBL and the self-awareness, building their language skills. But seeing those relationships grow and having students come back and say, like, I have never been able to learn like that because I was able to act and interact with somebody directly who was living that experience. Or during the lockdown in Spain, being able to hear from a student what it was like for them and to develop empathy. Those types of things that enabled me to connect my students from all around the world so quickly, that made a big difference. Me personally, just because I was amazed at the students, and professionally, of course, because of the learning that happened with them and that I got from them too. And that's been something we've been doing for about 5 years now.
That's inclining, I must say, that you talked about that pandemic didn't stop you and anybody to share their thoughts through technology. And when you talked about project-based learning through Edmodo or to Flip, where you can make videos and relationships, I believe that's when culture connect also comes, where people from different cultures can connect, share with their culture with each other, and then build empathy, build good bonds. And I think that's how we go together as humanity as well.
Agreed. Yes.
So I have this fun question for you. What was your favorite trip you have ever taken till now?
Oh boy. This, for anybody watching, this might be a predictable kind of a response, because one of my favorite places to go is to Nashville, Tennessee, just because I go with a lot of friends. We do some writing, but I don't know if I would pick that as my favorite of all time. I would say probably when I've gone on trips as a kid with my parents, we would travel to different places. And it was always fun to just go and explore places in the United States, and to go to France together for the first time, which that was a long time ago too. But I always loved traveling. I enjoyed it for a long time. And then I didn't fly for a really long time, and then had to get on a plane to go to a conference. But just being a kid and getting to go somewhere with my parents, whether it was, Las Vegas or France or California, and just the excitement of every day, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to see? All of those just great opportunities.
Cannot agree more. Like traveling with your family and friends is the greatest thing that you can. So for me, it has been like just during 2019 and 2022, I had been to Finland. So 2019 was like for a chaos event wherein I was presenting Minecraft workshops as a keynote speaker. And then I did my first offline internship in the month of June in Peace Pala Youth Center, Youth Summer Camp, where like I actually got an experience of how it is to work as a proper job. So
Yeah.
like it was my favorite trip like till now, wherein I got to learn how to work, and I got to meet so many new people, make connections with them, and actually after like 2 years, so I could travel outside my country. So it has been awesome.
Yeah, I did see that you had gone to Finland, and I was reading all of the things and just still amazed at all that you have done, and especially with Minecraft, because that is something I need to build my skills in for sure.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So where can we find you online so that the audience watching us live can connect you?
I am pretty consistent. So Twitter and Instagram, it's the RDENE915. If anybody wants to read my blogs, or I have guest bloggers that just share what they're doing, like I would love people to submit guest blogs. So my blog site, you just add the www and put the .com after the RDENE915. And if you want to send me an email, it's that same thing at Gmail. But I'm always happy to connect. I'm not an expert, but if I can help anybody and share ideas, or if you have ideas to share with me, please, by all means, send me a message.
Thank you so much for that. I've actually put that in the live chat,
Okay.
and also I'll put that in the description box as soon as the stream is available online.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we end this podcast, we would love to have a message from you for the audience watching us.
Oh, goodness. So let's see here. Thing number one, make sure that you connect, and whatever space works for you. Like this right now, people who are joining in the chat and watching and on Twitter and everything, because the more that you connect, the more that you learn and you have a support system. 2, don't be afraid to take risks with new ideas. So like me, I was just a Spanish teacher. I can't use augmented virtual reality. You can do these things. There's lots of resources out there. And 3, and these may not necessarily be in the in the right order. You could put them any way that you want, but don't be afraid to make mistakes and to not be the expert, because again, like you could ask me 10 questions and probably almost all 10 I'd be like, yeah, I was wrong about that, or I made this mistake. And that's okay, because we're constantly learning, and it's a good model to set for students to say, like, we don't know everything, but learning is an ongoing process. It's not an end product. And so I think hopefully those will be, help to somebody.
That's awesome. Like you talked about connecting, being a risk taker, and making mistakes, because that's how we learn. And I actually learned a line in Spanish for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I mess it up, but I'll try to speak it correct.
Okay.
So it's like mejor que mil días de estudio diligente e un día con un gran maestro. Did I say that right?
You did. You did.
Oh, thank you.
And did you, and now you have to tell everybody what you said, because now I'm going to test you.
Yes, I said that better than 1,000 days of diligent study is one day with a great teacher, and
Right.
that defines you.
Yes, yes. And I love the first word, the mejor. There's a lot of phrases in Spanish. It's like better late than never and all of these. And I try to teach some of my students some of these like idioms sometimes, but sometimes they look up on Google Translate and they don't get the exact same meaning. But yours was great. So
thank you. So we have lots of chat coming in first. I would like to ask you if we can show them to everybody watching. Okay, so we have Mr. Alex Isaacs joining us. Thank you so much for joining, Mr. Alex. And we also have Miss Monica joining us. And then we have the Citizen Cancun. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to have you here. And Citizen Cancun has also been saying that for us to grow and better the way that we teach, we must go outside the borders of the classroom with our students to allow them to explore more about what is happening outside there.
Oh, definitely. That is perfect advice.
And Ms. Monica says that game-based learning using Minecraft helps to sustain students' attention.
Yes, agreed on that too.
And even Citizen Cancun says that it's an Edmodo ambassador here.
Yeah, I've been involved in using Edmodo it was a long, long time. So it's great to connect with somebody else who is an Edmodo ambassador.
Also, we have my chair here. So I'm basically in a UNESCO summer camp right now, and the International Monetary Fund. So that is my chair. So thank you so much for joining, Mr. Juan David. And I guess that's all that we have in the chat. And Miss Monica says that connect, don't be afraid, don't be the expert. And she loves that, and keep learning.
Oh yeah, always learning.
Yes, that's how we all move forward as a team.
Yes, definitely agree. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for asking and for the great questions and for everybody who joined in.
Thank you so much. It was such a great experience for me to learn from you, from your ideas. That was so great. And thank you so much for everybody to join here and listen to this episode. And I'll see you on the next one. Till then, each one, teach 10. Have a nice day.
Thank you.